that it, for me, it'll do this nice side by side thing. And then I drag it in and edit it in my editing software and put it in. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so anyway, like I said, there, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We're going to let another recording. Yeah. Okay. All right. Should be. Yep. It's recording. All right. So I'm just going to basically kind of start off with like a quick introduction of who you are and a little bit of our relationship.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we'll just kind of jump into it. So, hey, we're here with Dave Roth, and Dave Roth and I have been friends for years. And fortunately for me, and sometimes unfortunately for him, he's been hooked into a few ultra runs that I've coined the phrase great stories come out of tragic situations. And Dave has some great stories. So but today we're here. We're going to talk about the Stagecoach 100 relay that we just did a couple weeks ago with Laticrete. You guys may not recognize Dave as being a Laticrete employee, but honestly, I brought Dave along because we had some Laticrete employees, and I was concerned that we wanted to have somebody else there that had kind of experienced ultra running, had a little bit of an idea. Because when I was out on the trail, Dave could be back there holding down the fort, per se. So Dave was nice enough to say yes and come on out. Now, so Dave, I'm just curious because I've always asked you as a pacer, and you kind of know what you're in for. When I asked you, hey, do you want to run this? what were kind of the thoughts?
Well, like you said, Troy, we've been friends for a long time, and we've experienced out on various trails. We've experienced some, some so-called tragedies on various occasions, and I was thinking, I don't know anything about this race, but I did sort of know the general area. And I thought, well, at least amidst whatever tragedy will arise, because I knew there would be tragic situations. I thought at least amidst whatever tragedy might arise, it's going to be beautiful because just knowing the area, and that's sort of what motivated me. The Grand Canyon. How can you beat the view?
Right.
And regardless of how I'm feeling, at least there'll be some eye candy out there. So that's sort of what was going through my head.
Well, good. So I think that maybe talking a little bit about training. Everybody thinks, oh man, if I'm going to go do this, I got to just pile in the miles and maybe, and I'm not saying downplay, but I think maybe be realistic about what you did and didn't do, and kind of what that looked like from the aspect of getting ready to come and do this.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about trail running is it's not just about sort of jogging, or you think of a road marathon, where you're jogging or you're moving quickly as for a long period of time. The great thing about trail running is, the trail doesn't allow you to do that necessarily.
That's right.
So you might jog on the flat parts and then hike the uphills and try to jog on the downhills. I mean, it's a real combination of sort of jogging or moving more quickly and just hiking or power hiking. And so, for training purposes, the nice thing is that combination on the trail gives you, I think, a little bit more flexibility when you're training. You don't just have to go out and, run 5 miles, every other day. You can do some miles here, do some miles there, maybe mix in, some bike riding or some weight training. When after you asked me, I forgot about it for about a month, and 6 months out, maybe, or six weeks out, sort of had the slap in the face about, hey, you better start doing more than you're doing. But more than I was doing, consisted of trying to do some longer jogs a couple times a week, trying to do some sort of cross training stuff a couple times a week. And I probably averaged sort of doing something, whether it was jogging or weights or biking, 3, maybe 4 times a week if I was lucky. Probably realistically more like 3.
Yeah.
And nothing, nothing overly intense. I think the longest run I took, yeah, getting ready for the race was maybe 6 or 7 miles, but that was after 3 or 4 weeks of just a mile here, a mile there, 2-3 miles here, 2-3 miles there. So it was the training was not intense, but the nice thing is, again, when you're on the trail, it doesn't have to be, as long as you can sort of keep moving at one speed or a slower speed.
Right. Well, I like, so, you probably didn't ever really go past halfway during training of your longest distance.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of felt like I should, right? You feel like, well,
you think
I
you
need
might,
to
yeah.
I need to do more, but in the back of my mind, and again, because of having some experiences out there, on trails and whatnot with you in the past, I sort of knew in the back of my head, well, it'll be okay, even if I didn't train as much as I thought I should. I had this assurance in the back of my head that it was still gonna work out, just because nobody's expecting you to sort of blaze the trail.
Right. Well, we left that to Daniel anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody under 40, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Under 50. Yeah. So in your mind, what did you expect? I mean, because like I said, you've run distances with me, but you've never been out there alone. And so I'm just curious, from the perspective of during your training. I mean, of course, there's times when you're out training, your mind's wandering to what that's going to be like. So what did you expect it would be like compared to what did it actually turn out to be like? I'm curious about that.
That was sort of interesting, because in my mind, prior to the race, I was just sort of thinking of it as, one of our prior races where we're both out there together. And when we're both out there together, I don't have to think about, where the trail is, or, do we turn here? Do we turn there? And I don't even have to really watch the markers all that closely. But on the first leg of the actual race, it wasn't a big deal, because it was during the daytime, and it was bright and nice, and it wasn't any trouble at all to sort of follow the trail. But the second leg, in the middle of the night, again, it was sort of interesting, because I hadn't really thought prior to the race about being out there by myself. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, man, I don't know, am I on the right trail? And because there were multiple spots where maybe it wasn't marked, or maybe it was, the trail just sort of washed out in a clearing or something. And again, we've had those experiences ourselves, where we're, trying to figure out what way we go. And it's always nice to be able to kibitz with somebody about that.
Yeah.
But it was a little different, by yourself at 3 a.m. I figured I couldn't get too lost, because there's other people on the trail as well, and if you just stop for long enough, there's going to be somebody that comes along, or you're going to see a light out there somewhere else. But I hadn't really thought about that pre-race, and that was sort of interesting, being out there, by yourself. Wasn't scary at all, but it was just a little bit of a wake-up call.
As I say, it's an interesting reality when you're away from the aid station, and now and what was interesting for us, and you and I probably, obviously the other guys wouldn't have thought about it, but we're not used to being that far in the front of the pack. We're not used to being that far away from, that far away from people,
Right.
And so, I found that as soon as you were away from the aid station, like when you said light in the distance, the light was a long ways off in the distance.
Yeah.
And there weren't nobody behind you. Once again, Daniel, thank you. But yeah, so it is a real reality of, it's dark out here.
Yeah, that's for sure. It was, I mean, that's sort of a fun part of it too. It's this, maybe, I don't know if it's a healthy fear or not, but it can be a little bit daunting, but there's a bit of a challenge to it as well, right? And just sort of, not that it's hard to figure out, but you've got to sort of figure it out yourself. And again, that's one of the, it's one of the fun parts of it, I think.
But I think that's the allure that I think that may be a fear, but then it turns into that cool moment of, I don't know, Zen or whatever. It is quiet. You are out there. It's just you doing what you're doing. And and it is kind of that, I guess I'm always trying to, it's hard to impart that into somebody. It's hard to get that feeling across until you're actually out there. I mean, Rob is like looking for races now. Rob is totally in, and which is exciting because I mean, when somebody picks up your excitement and does it, so I'm glad that you had that experience out there.
Well, and the other thing, sort of similar to Rob's experience, the other thing that I think it does, once you do something like that, it sort of opens up your mind to well, I can do other stuff that's similar. I mean, I'm capable of sort of signing up for a 10K or a half marathon or whatever, and it's just it's things that might otherwise sort of intimidate you, intimidate you less because you've done something like that, and it just sort of opens up more possibilities for sort of further to further that whole experience.
Yeah, I always stay when things are not well, like my first section of running in the mud, I just laughed and thought, I've run in worse. It's been worse. So whatever. Yeah. So all that to say, I would anticipate that you may or may not be interested in doing this again.
Oh, Troy, you know me better than that. I'll always say yes to you. Yeah, no, I definitely would be. And one of the fun things, I mean, most of the ones we've done in the past have been, fairly close geographically, they're sort of around Oregon, and that's nice. But man, it was really cool going somewhere, sort of a destination race almost. It was that added something to the whole experience as well. Plus, just meeting some of the other guys from your company and hanging out with them when we weren't running. Back at Steve's fifth wheel, it was there's it's sort of a community within a community. Right. And that you just can't, you don't get that anywhere else. You're all sort of experiencing the same thing. You might have different takes on it, but you just don't get that, if you're out by yourself doing whatever you're doing. It was pretty cool to go somewhere and to do what we did.
Well, it was interesting that, Daniel, that was one of the comments Daniel made, was that, being with the team, not being the runner, was a cool part of the experience, because like you just said, by the end of this thing, everybody had been up 30 plus hours with some cat naps in between. And, humor was funnier, and I mean, lots of things didn't matter anymore. And it just like, whatever. And I do think that was a lot of fun. And there's just so much going on. You got somebody that's traipsing across the desert, but at the same time, you've got 9 other individuals trying to get everything all figured out to get the next person out there.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that definitely was a fun part. So
I think you were on the trail at this point, doing maybe the last leg, but it was, there's a picture that somebody took that I've seen. You've probably seen it as well, where everyone but you were just sitting in Steve's fifth wheel, sort of on both sides of it. And, it's probably at that point, it's probably 5 a.m, maybe 5:30 in the morning. And we're sort of waiting for you to finish up or get the word that you're near the finish line. And, we were just sort of hanging out and talking. And it was, by that point, we'd been together for that 20 hour period. And like you said, up most of the night. And it was just I don't know. It was, it's hard to explain without being there, but nobody had to say anything, and everybody knew what everybody was sort of thinking too. So
Yeah,
it was a great sort of just the people part of it was just as rewarding as sort of the physical fitness part of it.
that's great. That's great. Yeah, I felt the same way, and I think everybody did. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. All right. Any other parting thoughts?
um be to your other listeners, just be careful when you see Troy coming, and try not to make eye contact.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time today. We will see you on Sunday, probably.
You bet. Good talking to you, Troy.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right. I won't be there on Sunday because I got to fly out Saturday night.
Are you